All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everybody to day 2 of IoT World Manufacturing Days. I'm Lucian Fogoros, I'm the co-founder of IoT World, and I'd like to remind you that this session is recorded and made available on demand. And it's exciting to get into the panel. But before we do, if you don't mind just taking a few moments, if you were in the attendance yesterday, make sure you post in the chat what you liked about it, what are some of the takeaways, and feel free to leverage the hashtag you see on the screen if you want to take that in the public, Twitter or LinkedIn, or put it on a chat. The Q&A section is where our panelists will be basically monitoring to answer your questions. So we track those. If we don't get within the next hour, we will make sure that we'll follow up with the respective panelists and get your answers. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jeff Winter, our advisor, friend. Thank you for supporting us.
Well, thanks for having me here. And hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Jeff Winter. I am one of the advisors of IoT World, and I'll be the moderator of today's session, the role of generative AI in manufacturing, a discussion of current and future applications. And I can honestly say that I'm quite excited about this session because the panelists we have today are true experts in their field. Not only do they have the talent, the training, the technical knowledge, and the industry knowledge and years of experience, but they're also well known and respected as being the top of their field. So I'm quite excited to hear what they have to say today. And for those of you that know me, you already know AI is one of my favorite topics, at least it has been for the past several years. And that's only increased since the world was introduced to ChatGPT in November of last year. And this single word now dominates not only the world of AI, but arguably most conversations out there in any field. So this panel today is going to help share all their insights on how generative AI is specifically transforming manufacturing. So let's get started by introducing our experts. We have Martin Cloak, and Martin is the founder and CEO of Raven AI. And Raven AI provides manufacturers with complete and accurate contextual information that describes exactly how production time is spent. Martin is an experienced executive, engineer, and award-winning technology entrepreneur with a background in manufacturing. Next, we have Marcus Gerster, and Marcus is the founder and CEO of Montblanc AI, the AI-powered software platform that enables factories to become smart factories, boosting productivity and efficiency while saving costs and energy. Marcus holds a PhD from MIT and has done extensive research on maturing AI from the lab to industry. Next, we have Jared Anderson. Jared leads the AI team at ADM. His team of AI engineers and data scientists create innovative technology solutions for global supply chains, manufacturing, transportation, commodity trading, the human microbiome, and food ingredients. Then we have Tim Linsenmeyer. As the CTO of Clover Environmental Solutions, Tim has been at the forefront of leveraging AI and ML to assist in transforming Clover's business operations. Under his guidance, Clover has leveraged AI and ML to enhance many systems, including forecasting, inventory, transportation, financial and distribution operations, which translate directly into lower cost and improved customer satisfaction. And last but not least, we have Ray Koenig, who's currently the CDO of Residio, a $7 billion home technology company spinoff from Honeywell in 2018. Ray's experience has been leading successful digital transformation programs for Fortune 500 companies as a digital and commercial leader. He also serves on the board of ReadyMinds, a leading edge AI solutions and services company. So as part of us getting together and kind of preparing for this, we broke up the topics into 4 main topics that we're going to go through today. How to think about generative AI, especially in manufacturing, challenges and risks associated to generative AI, where's the real value, and getting started, how to get started. So let's start the stage by asking the audience a poll question. And throughout this today, we're going to have 3 different questions. So the first question I want to know is, how much do you use ChatGPT or other generative AI personally on a daily basis, not for work? So for example, for school assignments or fun activities or anything else that's not part of your job. Is it never, 1 to 2 times, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, or all the time, like some people? So I'm going to have a few of these related to, obviously, generative AI as we go through it. But As we get started and as these kind of answers come in, let's kind of jump to our first topic, how to think about generative AI. So this technology, generative AI, isn't new to the AI world. It's been out for many years, but one company, OpenAI, developed one product, ChatGPT, that took the world by storm. And in less than a month, it became a household name and changed the way the world view AI. But what makes it so unique? How simple and easy it is to use. It requires virtually no training to use. But that doesn't mean the world fully knows how to use it or even how to think about it, especially when it comes to manufacturing. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about here now. Martin, I'll start with you. As the CEO of an AI software company, what is the biggest misconception about ChatGPT?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's a searchable database, that it's a chat interface for Wikipedia where you could take your answer and turn it into a haiku. And I think that's the way that typically people begin to use it and get a sense for what it is. And I would say that it's more of a software language than it is a searchable database. And I'll give you a quick story here. So over a couple of weekends ago with my 11-year-old son, we decided to try to make a simulator for this card game called Magic the Gathering, which is a quite complex card game with spells and all sorts of things here. And with ChatGPT, we were able to construct 2 decks that were balanced based on a budget that he had given me. Now with the 2 decks, we were able to simulate gameplay where we saw which of the 2 decks won. At the end of that game, we were able to then ask it to run 20 games and tell us the results of those 20 games. And then at the end of that, we were able to get it to improve the code so that it would run it better the next time. So that is not a chat interface for Wikipedia. That is a software language. And I think the best way to sort of realize that it's a software language is by playing with it. But I think that idea that it's software and not a chat interface is key. And I guess for those who have coded, it's like a software language where instead of having comments and code, the comments are the code. So I would say that's the most important thing when you're playing with it. Think of it as software. Don't think of it as an AI that's there to answer your questions.
I like that. And as someone who did play and compete in Magic tournaments 20 years ago, I wish that existed back then.
Wow.
So Jared, as the head of AI for your company, a company with over 40,000 employees, how do you describe generative AI to company employees?
Well, first I start with the very top of the company, and I explain to them it's one of many categories of AI. It's not the AI. And I tell the rest of the employees when I speak to them that it is a very powerful tool to generate content. You will find it very useful. It will enable you to communicate more effectively and really put your thoughts together. However, it is just one of many kinds of tools out there. And the point of why everybody's talking about it is, you mentioned it, Jeff, it's really a delightful experience. And that's why people are using it, because they are engaging with it. But to remind people, it is one of many kinds of AI. So we don't want to use it, we don't want to use a hammer and have everything be a nail out there with it, especially in a company like ours. So
I'm curious if you explain it differently to the top of the company versus the average person who might use it.
Yeah, with the executives, I say it is going to be a game changer. We've got to put the guardrails in place. We've got to make sure our culture is accepting of this kind of technology, that it enables our employees the right way. So it needs to be a top-down approach. So we have to make sure they're supportive of it. But everyone else, who's going to be using it on a daily basis needs to understand what it's used for, how to use it appropriately, because it's such in an early stage that we don't want to be putting data in there and if we don't have the security or the governance in place. So there's a lot of changes going on there, but I also don't want to limit the ability for our folks to utilize this kind of tool, because it is very powerful. So there's a lot of changes that will be coming. So
I think for all of us, that's very true. Let's continue that. Switch to Ray. How do you explain the value of generative AI? So not just what it is, but its value inside your company.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I think a big phrase that I like to use is understand the value and power in the data, right? So if you think about it, this is really about, hey, you can't manage and scale what you don't measure and understand in the value that you have in a data set within the organization. And a lot of companies tend to kind of manage data from sort of the volume and speed perspective, but they're not really thinking about what's the real value in the data in an organization relative to cost, or a broader sense of cost, or more importantly, monetization, or company value, or the assets of that data, and sort of kind of thinking through and really understanding and getting centered on, what do we have in value? How are we thinking about that and driving linkage in revenue attribution in what we do are critical in any company today, let alone a data company like ours. And then thinking about that in the context of indirect monetization. So that's a lot of what you would do today classically in bots for customer service, to direct monetization and scale with thinking of subscription services and scale to drive either sustainability opportunities with energy management, as well as direct cost savings to customers and how they manage their home thermostats.
That makes sense. Marcus, I'll switch to you. As the CEO of a different AI software company, how do you see generative AI changing the way that you talk with clients?
Yeah, I would say it really impacts the way we talk to our clients. As you said, Jeff, it's on everybody's mind, right? You cannot go into a conversation where it doesn't come up at some point, if it's over coffee or lunch. And we strongly believe there is a big opportunity out there for manufacturers to innovate and improve their processes. But one thing we also notice is for many of those, they don't really understand what the actual business value is behind it, right? To think about it as a game, it's for the consumer side of the house. So I think for us as a software company, it's completely crucial to help our clients to understand the potential and sort of bridge that gap. And we're doing this by developing a deep understanding of where they currently stand, right? If you talk to customers who are moving from one extreme from paper into Excel, that's a completely different discussion that you're having than from potential clients that are sort of already much more advanced. And then we sort of clearly point that vision of where they stand into what is the future going to be like potentially? What is the roadmap? What are all the technologies and how do they fit together? And I think most importantly then, sort of breaking down the vision into the first step. That's always the most important part. Break it down into a first step, this low-hanging fruit, and get it done. Demonstrate that value, because you can promise a lot of things, but the real thing that is convincing if you actually provide value. So yes, Jeff, I think ChatGPT, I would say, kind of added an additional dimension to the way we talk to our clients.
It almost doesn't matter what your company does. You got to talk about how it relates because of how universal this concept is. So Tim, I'll jump to you. As a CTO, how has the idea of generative AI been received at your company? Are there departments or levels that seem to just get it right away, and others that maybe struggled to kind of see its applicability and value?
Well, most of the departments are not fully aware of the potential and the benefits of generative AI. They play with it, they ask a lot of questions, but they really don't apply it to their business. They're more applying it to their personal lives. And they don't understand how it can really change the EBITDA, change the needle, change the ROI, and improve that inside our business. So what we do is, in our company, the companies who get it, the departments who get it, are the ones that are already using data for predictive analytics and to make decisions like logistics, warehousing, and manufacturing quality. So to educate our users and try to control this in a controlled rollout, the IT department built a couple of really cool, fun use cases, almost like a little game with it, to show some of the potential of generative AI. So we went to each pillar, educating the departments, challenging them to think outside the box, come up with creative use cases. Think like, we have unlimited time, unlimited money, unlimited people. What would I do with this technology to really help change the game inside our business? Getting them to think differently, challenge conventional thinking is really the message we're trying to get out. Anything is possible. The question is, just because we can do it, should we do it? So it's an education more than anything else. And it's really being perceived well to the departments that are using it.
So a lot more excitement and optimism than reluctance and maybe fear or concern.
Yeah, they're getting away from the typical ERP systems, right? And thinking outside the box, and user front ends are different now. They're creative, they're innovative, they're responsive, it's real time, and they're really, it's embracing, our company's really embracing it. It's just, we're a controlled, slow rollout of this department by department, so we can keep a good handle on it. As Jared mentioned, the culture, right? And as somebody else mentioned about, you got to control the data, you got to control it, you got to make sure that it's secure and protect your organization.
Well, and that's why I love asking this question, is just how you explain it, because we're all trying to figure this out together. There is no right or wrong answer because of its applicability to so many cases. I mean, one of the ways that I like to describe it is just think of it more like a personal assistant. Anyone that goes to a computer to look anything up or to input anything can benefit from ChatGPT. And that's most of the world. So it has wide acceptance. All right, why don't we go to our next poll question? So the first one was about personal use of ChatGPT for personal reasons. This poll question is about ChatGPT for work-related reasons. So for example, helping you write a work email or to summarize a document. So how much are you personally using ChatGPT or other generative AI on a daily basis for work? Same things, never 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and all the time. I will still admit I'm in all the time for both of these. So as these polls come in, I want to see how they compare to the last one. Let's switch to our second topic, which is challenges and risks associated with generative AI. So like I said earlier, ChatGPT is extremely easy to use. Everyone can use it with no training. And the answers it produces, especially with the GPT-4 model, are super impressive. In fact, they're often so impressive that they can give people and companies a false sense of confidence in its abilities. After all, ChatGPT will give you an answer to nearly everything you ask it, right or wrong. So how do we make ChatGPT work for us and not against us? And that's why I want to get into the risks and challenges associated with generative AI. Jared, we'll start with you. What do you see as the biggest challenge for generative AI adoption within manufacturing?
There's quite a few, but I think everybody mentioned here already. First one is that generative AI relies on a lot of data. And if you got bad data or poor data, just like any other tool that we implement, you're going to get poor results. So that's the first big one there. Integration with existing systems, just like any other software application or tool, you've got to be able to integrate it. How's it going to be used? Now, then you also have to have the technical expertise to be able to implement these tools. Do we have the right kind of people who understand this kind of solution and how to put it all together? The cost and investment of this is the training. You know, you're going to shift a culture change within your company. There's going to be costs involved quite a bit, just like any other solution. A big one here is trust and acceptance with the users, you know, because your point is if you tune it in a certain way, it may just generate all sorts of nonsense, and people may say, well, I got it from the computer, it must be true. Well, there's the truth or the acceptance of it. Well, it's lying to me, I'm not going to trust it any longer. So there's all sorts of things you got to deal with there. The ethical and legal concerns of this sort of thing. If you're going to rely on the output from it and make a business decision that might impact the company, it might put your company in jeopardy. From a legal position, there might be ethical things, biased data. So there's things you have to do, with there, and especially manufacturing with safety and reliability. That if you're relying on these kinds of solutions when it's generative in nature, you've got many things you need to think about there. So there's a whole slew of things you've got to really, put together.
Yeah, not just one, but a whole lot of them. So Marcus, I'll ask you then, what steps can be taken to establish enterprise privacy for generative AI models? And what are some potential avenues for achieving this goal?
Yeah, it's an absolutely gigantic topic. I think we could have 2 or 3 or probably 20 days of panel on this. But let me try to put it into sort of 3 categories. And the first, what I would call security. And that's the question, is my data secure, right? That's kind of what goes in and out. It's more the traditional aspects of data encryption, access control, firewalls, VPN, network segmentation. And when ChatGPT came out, it was kind of a free for all. And now sort of the IT departments are catching up on this. But that's, I think, something that's well understood. The second category is privacy. And that's sort of a question, how is my data used? Also not a new question, but when it comes to ChatGPT, there are kind of some different nuances to it. And the biggest one, I believe, is learning. Is the data that you put into the model used to actually train the model? Because generally speaking, that's what you want. You want to make the model smarter and smarter over time, especially for the questions that you're asking. But of course, if you put confidential information in there and it's sort of part of a public model, the data gets out there, which is something you don't want. And sort of associated to that, make kind of an interesting observation is where if you think about enterprise application, historically, they've been all very airtight. They've been on-prem, and they kind of moved into that hybrid cloud environment. Now with ChatGPT, we started on the completely other end, right? It's completely cloud, it's completely public. So what I'm strongly convinced of is that we're going to see a shift of that ChatGPT cloud public model into sort of this hybrid environment where people are going to realize which parts of ChatGPT do I need to cut out and put in my own environment, and which parts I'm completely happy and confident to leave in the public domain. And the third part, which was already touched on, is trust, right? And that's to be honest, the trickiest part is the answer that the model is giving me correct. They give plausible answers, but potentially incorrect answers. There's a lot of research going on. I'm sure that's going to improve over time. The pragmatic approach is, don't blindly follow every answer. Use common sense and use self-critique methods. That really worked for us very well. So sort of in summarize, how can you make sure that the organization is using ChatGPT in a secure way? And I think it all starts with policies, right? Make sure everybody understands what are the do's and the don'ts, and it's communicated well. Then also pick the right ChatGPT vendor, right? There's OpenAI, but there are also Microsoft OpenAI service and some other vendors coming out. And for example, Microsoft OpenAI have very strict policies around data security, and that sort of landscape will keep on evolving. But overall, don't stop experimenting. Make sure everybody has the boundaries of the sandbox they're playing with. They know the rules of the game, but don't stop experimenting, right? Because only through experimentation you will figure out what is actually the value of it. So put it out there, put the framework in place, and let them go.
Absolutely. And there's going to be so much that we're able to do with it as we learn more about its capabilities. So Tim, we'll jump to you. How can manufacturers ensure that generative AI systems are making ethical decisions, and what steps can be taken to mitigate the risks of unintended consequences?
Well, ethics are decided by humans and not generative AI. And because of that, it will change over time. It's a moving target, and it's bound to change over time because of human sentiment. Jared mentioned trust and acceptance, and data is the key to that. I mean, data to train the models is chosen by humans, and it's critical that you audit that data to ensure that it's a true representative of the norm and that it's unbiased. Data is the key. Generative AI systems are only as good as the data that they're trained on. And I'll give an example. Our chat, our internal chats bot is supported by GPT, and we trained it on 2 years of historical manual generated human data. And it was surprising to see some of the decisions that our internal folks made and some of the things that they said and promised. So we had to really review that data and make sure that it was the correct data to train the model, because it's going to be handling a few hundred of our websites, even the ones internationally. But like I said, generative AI systems are only as good as the data that they're trained on. And we continually review the outputs and the results, and we look at the risks, perhaps with maybe an oversight team and some of the developers included in that. We want to make sure that it's safe, protects the organization, doesn't put us at risk. But again, trust and acceptance, data is the key, and you got to have a team that continually reviews the results to make sure that you're not putting your organization at risk or putting something out there that is going to be very difficult to pull back, especially when creating content.
It's interesting that you bring up two human elements to this point. One is that humans are selecting the data that's actually being put in. And two, like you said, which most people probably don't think of, is the fact that ethics are determined by humans and they can change over time. So it's a slightly moving target, with new data being pulled in by humans. It's going to be a challenge for a lot of companies to figure this out as it keeps changing over time.
It's bound to change. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Ray, what impacts will the widespread adoption of generative AI have on the workforce in the manufacturing industry? So now switching to the people.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. But I'll just have a quick comment on that last conversation. And I think everyone knows Sam Altman was on, up on Capitol Hill, right, in one of the subcommittee hearings, talking about, ethical practices, or I think the term is mindful AI. And, Congress is kind of commenting on their remit of missing the social wave that came in with some of the bigger social apps 10 years ago, and not really maybe thinking about legislating the impact of that better. So interesting topic and a lot of perspective and mindful AI. But if you kind of take a step back to your question directly, Jeff, the manufacturing industry has been around since the Industrial Revolution, since the 19th century. So largely humans have been in control, right, of the manufacturing process and involved in everything end to end in that value chain. So the speed of adoption and the shift now with, I just read a recent stat about 15% of companies are really adopting this in their manufacturing process, about 30%, 2x that over the next 5 years. I think it's going to be probably higher than that in my gut. And you think about the speed of adoption. I mean, this is now the fastest growing consumer app in history, right? This ChatGPT dwarfed in the first 2 months of 100 million users. Took TikTok to 9 months to reach that. So I think the adoption and the rate of speed and change is going to be pretty dramatic. And so you kind of have to think about all that data, all that third-party data, both indirect and direct, that's going to be monetized and looked at. That's going to have a lot of value in the industry and understanding on how that's going to be metabolized. And then I think, it's all the other big standard things that I can see happening across industry. First and foremost, there's a lot of safety and quality improvements. We're seeing that in mobility with autonomous vehicles, and what that looks like. It could impact from a safety perspective, reskilling, shift in roles, and then all the automation and human AI collaboration that'll happen in industry that'll radically change impact and efficiency.
It's going to change a lot of people's jobs from the entry level all the way up to CEO.
Absolutely. A huge shift in reskilling will happen in industry. I don't think it's going to necessarily replace everyone, just like calculators didn't, computers didn't. I think AI is really a collaboration, right, to drive an efficient outcome.
I like that way of thinking about it. So Martin, we'll end with you on this topic. We've talked about a lot of the big risks, but I'm curious what you would think is actually the biggest risk that people aren't talking about with ChatGPT.
Wasting time and getting distracted. And I think one of the things that a lot of the narrative of generative AI right now is the fact that it can do no wrong. And no matter where you plug it into your organization, it's going to provide instant value. And this is it's human nature to think this way. It's also human nature compounded with the kinds of things that we all like to post on LinkedIn about the potential. So there's massive potential here, but it is not useful by definition. I think right now, both Marcus and Ray and Jared talked about the fact that it is evolving. And I think there's a lot of similarities between generative AI and 3D printing when it first came out. So 3D printing came out and now you're going, wow, this is going to change everything in manufacturing. Suddenly complexity comes for free. You don't need to think about how to machine it. So then you start making stuff and then you realize that it is only applicable in a small subset of cases. And right now, if we look at where 3D printing is applied, people have figured out how to deliver tremendous amount of value in small areas. So right now we have the capability. We haven't yet closed the loop and figured out those killer applications of generative AI. And people need to figure this out. Now, who figures it out is the next question. So if you're a mid-sized manufacturer, should you be in the business of experimenting with new software, or should you be focusing on the core of your business? And I would say that right now there's an opportunity, in particular for mid-sized manufacturers, to drive a ton of value by getting technology companies to hold their feet to the fire to provide value and business value. I think there's a lot of risk right now where it's so easy to use. It's also so easy to get distracted. So I would say, a focus. If you're not in the business of developing and experimenting with new technologies, I would look for businesses that are doing that and hold their feet to the fire to provide actual value.
I think that's a great example. And I wish I would have had it as like a poll question is how many times have you typed something in a ChatGPT that you knew was just meant to be fun or funny and provided no value? Because if you're not doing it, you're not experimenting with it. I mean, for myself, as an example, I did have to type in, can you write the lyrics of a song about Industry 4.0 in the tune of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? If you're not doing that stuff, you're not being creative and experimenting. But at the same time, it can waste a lot of time if you do it too long. So I agree with you. All right. Why don't we go to, unfortunately, my real last poll question, which the first was about personal use and the second was about work-related use. But now I want to just understand if you have, or if you're aware, if you are using generative AI tied to any company data. And if you don't know, then don't answer, but it's either yes, it's tied to some company data, no, but it's in process or it's being planned, or third, no, there's no plans to use it right now. if you don't know, don't answer. But I am curious kind of how companies are taking this now and tying it to their company. So the next topic is where are manufacturers using ChatGPT and generative AI, and what is the real value, to lead into what Martin was just talking about. So we went over, how to think about the technology and the risks. Now let's talk about the value, the real value. And this is kind of our subject that we're going to have here. So let's start with Tim. What can manufacturers use ChatGPT or generative AI for right now? Where are either you using it or where are you looking at using it?
Well, you had mentioned data, and we are definitely leveraging internal data. The places that we're using it right now is predictive maintenance and a lot of our robotics and our machines and our manufacturing. We're using it in supply chain optimization, as we have a tremendous amount of data on lead times and transit times and on-hand inventory. And so it's really helping out there, again, leveraging our internal data. Quality control using custom vision. And as the sales team would say, we're using it on anything related to sales because we're all in sales. But we really work hard to generate the internal data, even sometimes synthetic data, and train the model on what we're expecting. As a global manufacturer, we're having challenges writing work instructions in Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and PDFs, and then we have to translate them into multiple languages. And we built a tool with Azure and GPT to help us translate thousands of these documents and maintain them in several languages and get them out there. And it's really, really been very beneficial for us. As I mentioned, anything related to sales, we work with our sales and marketing team, and we did the fun one about generating friendly product descriptions. Amazon resellers had posted a case study on it, and they're using it with very good results. We did it. We had about 15,000 products that we make, and we generated all new descriptions. A lot of flexibility, a lot of fun stuff came out of that. We had to change a couple of descriptions, but we're seeing an increase in sales, or at least increasing in requests because of some of these product descriptions as our products are listed on multiple portals. The 24/7 multilingual chatbot, that's been a big help for us. As many websites as we have in these countries, providing invoicing data, product information, installation data, it's really, really been helpful for us. It takes a big load off of us. Our previous manual chatbot was staffed 7 to 4, and now it's 24/7 in any language. You can really do a lot of stuff for it. My favorite use case that we're working on right now, it's a little challenging, but we're certifying employees. As we have so many products to make, each employee is not certified in, obviously as many products as we would like, so it limits what we can manufacture on a daily basis. So we're building a tool that allows us to have GPT help certify employees at a very high level, maybe in multiple at one time. Instead of right now, we're testing it with one at a time, but we're allowing employees to go over, take time out of the line, take time for lunch breaks or whatever you want to do, come in early, stay late, and we're rewarding them on the more certifications they have, the better, because it helps us in our flexibility in manufacturing. But leveraging that to train people and not have to have leaders or line managers or staff supervisors go and train people individually. Employee certifications for our products and manufacturing is one that's really, really paid off for us.
That's exciting. You're using it in a lot of different functions at the same time to benefit a lot of different
groups. We're trying. It's been a challenge, but we're trying.
You're on the forefront. So let's switch, Ray. Now I'm going to be curious on probably a harder topic, but how can generative AI be leveraged to improve the efficiency and productivity of actual manufacturing processes?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Tim, thank you. You gave me quite a nice segue. I mean, I think Tim outlined some of the very clear use cases of where AI is helping companies drive a lot of efficiency and outcome from an indirect monetization perspective. But I mean, frankly, the use cases are limited, Jeff. I mean, they're limitless, right? I mean, in the context of whether it's freight logistics or warehouse storage optimization or inspection and quality control, right? With evaluating component images on a production line, to a standard, and then you're automatically getting pushed something interesting. Or even on the maintenance side, I think the research that I'm showing is that some organizations that are beginning to implement predictive maintenance capabilities are seeing up to 20 to 30% drop in operational costs. And I work for a big mobility company, Hertz. And we used to look at our fleet in the context of time and mileage, right? But the ability to pull the sensor data from the vehicle and have a much more intuitive or insightful forecast on maintenance was a huge operational save for us, and just in the inception of starting to look at some of that data and how to operationalize it. And then I'll come back to safety. I really think it's going to make a significant impact to safety. Safety is first and foremost, on top of mind of any plant manager or manufacturing leader in industry. And which is, you see what's happening in mobility with, autonomous cars potentially taking 94% of the fatalities out of crashes. I think that percentage is going to be pretty significant in manufacturing as well.
That's exciting. Just still yet more and more potential applications for this technology. So let's dive into a specific one. Marcus, in what ways can generative AI be used in predictive maintenance applications?
Yeah, I think I heard that already 2 times from Tim and Ray. I think to be sort of this prominent use case out there for quite some time, where it's really about manufacturers want to have a notification pop up and say, hey, something is going to break in 3 weeks. Replace this, otherwise you're going to have unplanned downtime. And generally speaking, the way it works today is that you have machine learning models that are trained with historical data, and it kind of learn what's normal. Now, if new data comes in, if it's outside, it's detected as an outlier. And then there is a lot of logic around how to identify which set of outliers actually indicate a maintenance need. And that's where the challenge really lies. And more often than not, there are a lot of false alarms out there with little explainability in the end. So sort of when we talk to our clients, what we hear is, those systems raise more questions that they can actually answer. But manufacturers, they don't want to have more questions necessarily, right? They want to have more answers. And I think ChatGPT can really, really help with that. By itself, it cannot provide those answers. But when you start integrating ChatGPT with all of your existing databases, with the predictive maintenance system, with analytics platform, everything that you have within the company, that's where I think sort of then the true big business value of ChatGPT comes in, because it can provide very specific answers to questions like, can I push my maintenance of my pump by 1 week? Can I recall, I got a recall of my batch last week. Why did this happen? What did all happen in sort of this manufacturing process? So those are like very specific questions. It's not part of like this ChatGPT public knowledge aspect. And I think predictive maintenance is only kind of the start. It's sort of this buzzword out there. But imagine sort of what other applications that can be enabled. If everybody in the organization really had access and can leverage all of this huge volumes of data to answer any questions that they have in seconds without the need of actually being a data scientist, right? I think that's where the true value lies.
I like it. Those are some good specific examples of how to use it for predictive maintenance. So let's switch then to another topic within this kind of process of manufacturing. Jared, in what ways can generative AI contribute to sustainable and environmental friendly manufacturing practices?
Well, what's funny is what everybody just said is applicable to this space too. So I think the key thing to remember is the algorithms and the tooling behind this kind of technology is artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatnot. It's the same kind of thing where it can consume a lot of different kinds of data and find insights, which is what we've been saying with AI for quite some time. The difference here is the dialogue ability that people can have with this kind of data, which is what people find delightful. They can actually communicate and get information, which leads to, that will allow people's ability to learn much faster. And people's ability to learn much faster is there, then they can effectively, make dramatic changes in sustainable environmental issues and whatnot. I'd like to take that just another step. So imagine this ability where you're having a dialogue with the system that understands the context that you're having, right? Which is great. Now you can tune these kinds of models to say, act like a very specific kind of instructor. We've all seen different, models out there of what's the most effective way to learn. And everybody's slightly different. So these models can be very specific and personalized. So that person can learn very, very quickly on a specific topic. Now imagine the interaction going on because it's a dialogue. Right now it's textual based. In the future, you're putting on your VR headsets and generative AI can be more visual oriented. And it can recognize what you're doing right there in front of the machine and say, whoa, slow down there, Cupcake. you need to do this. Or it can bring up the the user manual or tell you exactly what's in that manual at that point in time because it's recognizing things. So it's all about speed, efficiency, and everything else that was mentioned. But there's a huge future in this space. And, we've hit that inflection point. It's delightful. People are really excited about this, but I don't think we're anywhere near what's going to happen.
That's true. You brought up a good point. The world got excited over just the text, let alone everything else that generative AI can and will eventually do, probably pretty soon. So Martin, where do you think the biggest untapped value is, either for manufacturers themselves or companies like yours that provide software to manufacturers?
I think we've discussed it on this chat so far here, but effectively manufacturers have been instrumenting and leveraging their structured data for decades. And you can see this with analytics and even the AI that's been used right now. And I think the way to think about the data that organizations have today is you can think of these two big piles. You have the structured numerical stuff and then the textual data. And for many organizations, we haven't been able to access or mine this textual data effectively. And this is huge potential here. And I think just in sort of keeping things focused on business value, to get business value from technology, the kinds that we're talking about today, you get that by understanding your problems deeply. And effectively, we can get so far with data from these digital systems, but this context that's unutilized context from a maintenance perspective, say your PM process, or the comments that your maintenance techs have put in that describe what just happened, that is extremely rich context that hasn't been instrumented effectively. And if the goal is to ultimately improve by fully understanding problems, there's amazing amounts of context right there. But there's one extra thing that you'll get if we begin to design generative AI into our workflows. And that is not only accessing the context that people are putting in right now, it's generating new kinds of context. Because you can just imagine the kinds of conversation a maintenance tech would have if rather than simply explaining what just happened, they could have a conversation with a system that understands all the other context. So there's this extra layer of context that doesn't currently exist because all of these little problem-solving activities happen in isolation. So just imagine if each problem-solving activity involved full access to all the things that have happened at that particular machine, which is really exciting. So I think the value right now is that getting this context, both numerical and textual context, is valuable as long as you have a shovel and you're digging to understand a problem. If you have a shovel and you're just waving it around and showing everybody how fancy your shovel is, not value. So you need to be in the business of digging to understand the root cause of problems. And if that's the mindset you have, and now that you can dig into both your numerical and textual data, huge potential.
Yeah, that's exciting. I love the analogy. And I'm just thinking back to the predictive maintenance example of having something as simple as having a question that you ask a machine. It's pulling the user manual. It's pulling all your maintenance data from your CMMS. It's pulling vendor information live on, maybe things that they've figured out. It's pulling in all this stuff together and be able to give you the best possible answer right there on the spot. That's powerful.
And optimize it. Because in some ways, the document itself that's used to guide this process, it now can become a live document that is influenced by the kinds of things that maintenance techs are doing on the shop floor.
Very true. All right, our last topic of this session is around getting started in the future of generative AI. So I assume everyone is already sold on the power of ChatGPT. The question becomes, how and where do you start? And after you start, where is it going to go from there? So Ray, I'll start with you. Help us on where to get started. There's so much potential, so much opportunity, but how do you decide where to start?
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, this is kind of, I think about it as an executive leader, and I think everyone on this panel and everyone out there listening, is getting the call, from their boss or someone on the board to say, what are we doing with this whole chat GPT thing, or what's happening in the space and what are we doing about it? And I think it's kind of just, I guess you'll say fundamental or foundational. It's a pretty pragmatic approach of just, what's the problem we're solving, right? Are we customer centric in our thinking around that problem? And where does that kind of link to a broader strategy, right? And what we're trying to drive, right, from operational strategy. So I think, thinking about the problem, how we're defining success around that problem and being really clear in customer-centric terms, I think is important. And having an 80-20 view on, is this problem going to solve, the majority, of the outcomes that we're trying to get after, or that we're ultimately trying to measure. And then I think it's like everything else, it starts small, pilots, lean in, test, learn, and then scale into the organization. And I think, fundamentally starting with the what before you pivot into a how is critical, and then understanding some of the foundational data value points that I mentioned earlier and the governance pieces around this are both all critical. And it's collaborate, innovate, and win, right, at the end of the day.
And it's one that a lot of people know me as the statistics and trends guy. And this is probably the biggest one I get asked of, like, what are the statistics behind this? And we just don't have them yet because it's not been out long enough. I can't wait for maybe 6 months to a year to have some of the statistics of what everyone's actually doing with this stuff, where they're starting and how they're doing it. So Tim, once you decide where to start, how do you get going? Especially knowing everyone in the world is figuring this technology out at the same time. And where do you go for help?
Well, it's similar to the previous question. Getting started is the hardest part. And again, we made a lot of mistakes there and learned what to do and what not to do. But as I mentioned before, we went to our departments and asked them what's their biggest pain point. And if they had unlimited time, money, and people, what would they solve? And either increase revenue, lower costs, or improve customer sat. And we also asked them to estimate ROI. And we got so many small, minor requests that weren't moving the needle, and we wasted time on these small initiatives that weren't really doing anything. They weren't game changers. So then we took the biggest opportunities that we saw and we leveraged generative AI to help address it. And I can tell you this, that almost every project we did, the ROI, it's far exceeded our expectations. The results have to be measurable. Some of the requests that we got weren't measurable. But to get started, we like to take the hardest, nastiest problem that we have, the one that's the biggest ROI, and just, bite its head off. And the supply chain.
I think it came back and bit him.
It's hallucinating. It's hallucinating, Jeff.
We'll get back to Tim when he rejoins.
All the cool stuff. Go ahead.
We missed the past 30 seconds, Tim. You're talking about supply chain.
Sorry. To get started, I apologize. It looks like my internet is unstable here. The supply chain was the biggest opportunity for us, and we wanted a best-in-class solution. And we chose 3 consulting companies that had generative AI case studies out there. They were competing for our business, and we wanted them to train and educate IT on these use cases. And we wanted to make sure that our results are exceeding our expectations and measurable. And that's really how we got started, is we got these consulting companies, 3 of them, to come in and compete for our business. And they trained us. They showed us how to do it. 3 different opportunities for them. All were different. All the solutions were different. But at the end of the day, our team is trained, much better knowledge about it. And if we have any questions, then we can call them directly. But they did that for almost nothing for us to get started on it. So again, I recommend partnering with a solid company, have them earn your business like we did, and compete for your business. And you'll be surprised how quickly it takes off in IT.
Makes sense. Good advice. So Martin, what types of projects do you typically like to start with when discussing ChatGPT with companies, and why?
Well, maybe I'll get specific. So for those listening who actually want to start a project and pull it through, I think one of the things I mentioned earlier was the idea that you need to use it to understand it. And so a perfect example is a survey. So the most basic thing you can do to create a survey is ask it to make a survey and give you the questions. So now you have the questions. I would say that's level 1. The next level would be to execute that survey and ask the chatbot to actually go through the questions in sequence and get the answers. The third level would be to analyze the results of that survey, summarize results, and get insights. The fourth level would be to recommend how you can improve the survey so that you get more people to get to the end of it. And then the last one is to use AI agents, where it's automatically updating the survey on the fly, making it, tuning it on the fly. So I think with that approach, it's almost bridging the gap from what people are using it for today, which is basically document creation, creating that survey, and beginning to understand the full capability of now you can have a self-optimizing system that is maximized for conversion. This is what I'm part of a nonprofit, for manufacturing, and this is what we're doing to onboard our members by using AI to get them to go through the survey, generative AI. But I think it's important, even if you're on the, on the buyer side and not on the vendor side, if you want, as Tim mentioned, you want to get people competing for your business, you're in a lot better position if you understand the capabilities and understand if the vendor that's speaking to you is talking generalities or they're talking specifics. So I think, the more educated, manufacturers are, the better, even if they're not going to be doing the work themselves.
Good advice. And I like that specific example. So Jared, you have a team of AI engineers and data scientists working for you. How have you adapted your jobs because of generative AI? And how do you and your team plan to stay current on future advancements and applications?
The focus has changed because it's the biggest thing that people are talking about right now, but the way we've operated hasn't. We've always been looking at AI from a future perspective, keeping up with the latest, tools, trends, techniques out there. I encourage constant training. I want certifications on my team. I want them to go out there and spend a lot of time on the latest tools and techniques out there, because generative AI is a big one, but there's going to be more coming, or variations of generative AI, and we've got to be ready for that sort of thing. Maybe some of the focus that's changed a bit is more of the legal aspects of this. The compliance things are coming down the road because there's being more scrutiny, from government, local, state, federal, world, other countries on data and whatnot. We've all heard it. It's all out there, but there's more scrutiny involved, and there's more of an urgency about, this stuff is really taking off. People are getting, worried about it. What should we do? Well, there is some truth to that. And we have to play a hand in that. And I need my folks to be aware of how they're going to have to operate in the future, with their skill sets. It needs to constantly grow, and they've got to be ready to help enable these kinds of tools and technologies, not just generative AI, but everything else that's coming. So it's all about the learning and the building of the culture around learning and the acceptance of exploration, and being able to recognize that things are going to be disruptive in many different ways. But the more, I hear about people are afraid of their jobs, losing their jobs, which it's real, it will be disruptive. The latest stuff I'm seeing, even yesterday on a call with one of the top AI lawyers in the country, there's going to be so much work out there that people don't even comprehend what's going to happen. Like, wow, there is going to be some significant proliferation of new ideas, new things of doing things, and we're not ready for it, but it's going to be very, very exciting. So I don't know how else to be really positive about that, but I'm almost freaked out. Like, there is going to be so much work and opportunity for people.
And I think that comes from someone who understands the technology and its value. And those that do, I think, see the same optimism and opportunity and value ahead of us. So it's exciting. Marcus, how might generative AI impact the software toolbox of manufacturers, and what can manufacturers do to prepare for this?
Yeah, I think we touched on a lot of those topics already, but if you look at sort of what manufacturers have today, it's really, I would call it silos of mostly disconnected systems, right? You have MES, ERP, QMS, SCM, PLM, CMS, and I can go on with that list, right? I can bore you for the next hour with that list. And if you talk to people, right, if they try to find an answer to a question, it was gathering information from across those different sources and departments. And often, more likely than not, they just pick up the phone and call the person next door and say, hey, what happened in that shift last night on that particular line? And then they call the next person to sort of trace down what really happened. At best, maybe they have some dashboards. But for me, if I think about this, the only logical evolution is to have this a single lens in a growing world of data. And search is sort of the best example. Google is that single lens into the internet. And some companies actually implemented similar search functionality in sort of internets to search their knowledge base. And I'm convinced, as already mentioned, that ChatGPT really sort of marks that inflection point for manufacturers. It will not be the solution to everything, but it marks that inflection point where you think about a sort of privately and fully integrated version of ChatGPT or whatever solution is out there will become the foundation to find answers to more and more complex questions, right? I think that's sort of the eventual goal. But in practical terms, if you know how manufacturers maybe can get started or prepare for that future world, I think the first one is really technology it's complex and it's changing very, very quickly. It changes on a daily basis. There's new things coming out. So if you're sort of like a mid-sized manufacturer, find the right technology partner, or even if you're larger, like finding the right technology partner, I think it's very important, because let them do what they know best, right? Which is to worry about technology, because that's going to free up time from you to do what you know best, which is actually running your business more efficiently by leveraging technology and not by building technology just for the sake of actually building it. And then once you have the right partner, start small, iterate fast, be agile, right? I think nobody really knows where the destination is, but you have to figure out what is that first, second, and third step, and sort of let it grow organically, the project within the organization, and you're going to see value automatically coming in the end. And last, I think, don't wait, right? There hasn't been a better time to start those activities. All the pieces are finally coming together, and it's just super exciting to be sort of at that time in that industry.
I agree. I think we're all excited about it. All right, let's switch. We've got about a few minutes here for some Q&A. We got quite a few came in, and I think about half of them actually got answered through what we had already talked about so far. But my first question I have to share that I think is kind of funny that someone actually asked is, how do we know Jeff isn't AI generated? He seems a little too happy. You'll never know. So let's ask a more real question that someone had. Any tools do you suggest to train the generative AI to your company's data? I guess, Jared, I'll just start with you for that. If there are any suggested tools for it, and anyone else can chime in after.
Tools to train? Well, we like Microsoft because we're an Azure shop, obviously, and we have the ability to use all the OpenAI tools through Azure, which provides a very secured system, enables us to, build models, whatnot. And I think that's a key thing is it's not what tools at this point. There are many out there being developed very rapidly, open source ones are very powerful. What's most important is the skill set of the people, working on your team. You've got to make sure that they understand. And because the tool, it's not something on the shelf that's been for a long time, it's been matured. So you're gonna have to rely more on the expertise of the people that you have working for you to build these kinds of models. I think that's really the focus that you need is skilled up people on how to do these things. You're scientists and machine learning engineers and whatnot.
Anyone else want to chime in on that? If not, I'll get one more question then. All right. Is generative AI similar to the whole blockchain trend where everyone was first trying to use it, but found out that there may be simpler, less complex ways of integrating it? Now that we understand, do we think the same trend is going to happen with generative AI?
I'd love this one because I've been using that. Yes, it's like people got really excited about blockchain and then used it as a hammer and used everything. So you can apply it everywhere. It's like, well, no, it's just one of many kinds of tools and it's not applicable. This is the same kind of thing. It is very exciting and conceptually it could be used, but at the same point, I think many of these use cases are to be defined, which is virtually everything out there. People are going to start realizing that there's really better ways of doing it, better AI tools out there.
Anyone else want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I think I can chime in and add something. I think for me, it's not about ChatGPT as a single tool or as a solution, but it's about kind of the movement. And I've been in research for the last years, and everybody there was kind of nervous and waiting for like this big bang that research really gets pushed out, right? Because we all knew, well, there's something brewing, there's something brewing. And I think that's sort of the main takeaway. I'm sure it's going to level down and people are going to figure out then eventually how to use it. But for me, it's more thinking about the general systems, AI systems that are now really on the rise. They sort of experience that explosion that it is specifically about ChatGPT.
I like it. If there's no other comments, then I appreciate everyone for being on this panel. This was very exciting and I learned a lot as well with everyone. Thank you. And I will hand it over to Lucian for any final remarks.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, the panelists. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible, also for the supporting organizations, and would like to invite you to the next session on how to improve the OEE leveraging the IoT technologies. See you in the next session. Thanks, everybody.